The suprachiasmatic nucleus is a structure in the brain which plays an important role in the circadian rhythms. In other words, it's the body's biological clock. There are a series of other biological clocks in the body which regulate activities according to time, and the suprachiasmatic nucleus sits squarely in the centre of these clocks and is thought to be responsible for regulating the body's rhythms. So if we look at the diagram, there is a sagittal section through the brain, and what this means is that it's like we're looking at somebody from the side. So on the left side of the diagram is the eye, so that's the person, I suppose, looking forward. You can visualize it a little easier. And on the right side of the diagram is the back of the brain. That's where the cerebellum, the little brain, sits underneath the brain. So on this diagram, the red dot marks the spot. That's the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it sits on the optic chiasm, hence its name, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Supra meaning above, and the chiasm being the crossing of the optic nerves. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if we go back to the eye, you'll notice that there's a line connecting the eye to the optic chiasm, and that is the optic nerve. The optic nerve transmits all the visual information from the eye to the brain. So the optic nerve is an incredibly important structure for us to be able to see. Now, the optic nerve would, both optic nerves would cross over the optic chiasm, and then seated above them would be the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And this is quite interesting in terms of the structure, because if you want to know the time and you don't have your wristwatch, then you would have to kind of gauge it from the environment. You know, you would look at the sun rising, or the sun setting, or getting an indication of how light or dark it was outside. Now, the brain does this automatically. You don't need to think about it. It just does it. So it's a very smart mechanism. And this is what's operating through the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That's why it's directly above these two incredibly important optic nerves. And the next quite interesting feature about the suprachiasmatic nucleus is that it sits squarely in the centre of the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is a structure within the brain which coordinates a number of physiological functions or activities in the body. So it's a kind of control centre for many of the body's activities, and it initiates signals which it sends to the pituitary gland, which then sends further messages around the body to different structures. So it's kind of coordinating or initiating fairly important physiological functions related to things like sleep and appetite. So now you can see the kind of almost brilliance, if you would like to think of it in evolutionary terms. I suppose brilliance isn't the right word to use, but when we put all of this together, it does seem incredibly efficient. And what it's doing is picking up the information from the environment about the lightness and darkness, and sending it straight to the areas of the body that need to pick up on these signals, and that's kind of why we might feel hungrier at certain times of day, and why we might be more likely to feel tired in the evenings, and why we might, for instance, get jet lag after going on an aeroplane. So the suprachiasmatic nucleus is the area where it's all happening. And in some conditions, these incredibly important signals about rhythm and about the environment don't get out to the other structures, and this can be associated with illnesses possibly, and this is an area of research that is ongoing.